Hello, a very good morning, a very good afternoon, depending on from where you're joining in from. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Abhilash, and I am from the Active Directory Solutions or the AD Solutions team here at Manage Engine, and I will be your presenter for today. Before I jump in, I'd like to again thank each and every one of you for making out the time and for joining in on the day 2 of the IT Security Masterclass series. Thank you so much for making out the time again. Before we jump in, I'm working from home, and I'm pretty sure most of you out here today are working from home as well. So I just wanted to make sure that the audio and video are reaching to all of you well and clear. So if my voice is well and audible without any distortion or without any breakage in the audio, if you could give me a confirmation in the chat window, just say yes, just say okay, just say great. So I can confirm that my voice is reaching to you well and clear. Thank you, Tommy. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, John. Thank you, Larry. Looks like everything is okay. I hope you guys can see the video as well. The title and the email ID is right in front of you. So at any point in time during the webinar, if you feel the audio and video are cutting off, or if you feel there's a certain lag between the audio and video, just let me know using the chat window, and I'd be more than happy to get that fixed for you on my end as much as I can. Now, before we go ahead and jump in, I'd like to tell you that the entire 40 to 50-minute session today will be recorded, and the recording will reach your inbox along with the slide deck of this specific session. If you've got any questions, please feel free to keep your questions coming using the Q&A tab. A request from me would be to put the questions using the Q&A tab, because what happens is sometimes when you put the questions through the chat window, they get lost, and I'm unable to retrieve them after the webinar is done. There's a software glitch with Zoom, I think. So please do ensure that any queries, any questions that you may have, please put them to the chat window so I can access them when the webinar is done. Right? So yes, I will be answering your questions towards the end. The last 10 to 15 minutes will be a dedicated Q&A session. And even if I miss answering your questions, or if I haven't seen your questions, please do not worry. I will definitely reach out to you with a detailed answer on your email ID. Okay? So yes, the topic for today is cloud security and Windows data security. So this is day 2 of the IT Security Masterclass. On day 1, we spoke about Active Directory. Okay, so we spoke about Active Directory environments, how misconfigurations, how vulnerabilities in Active Directory environments, how certain unmonitored areas in Active Directory environments, how they could lead to a security incident. I showed you a few attacks, and I also gave you the link to a web page, which is basically IT security under attack. So this is the web page I gave you the link for. And in this web page, I told you that there are many attack techniques that you could take a look at. You could take a look at the video simulation of the attack technique, and you could also take a look at the solution, how Log 360 can help you detect such attacks on your network. So I'm going to quickly copy the link again for you, and I'm going to put it in the chat window. So if you need to access the page again, you've got the link right here in the chat window. So do take a look at the page. There are close to 24 attacks on the page. As soon as you register, you will be able to see 24 attacks on the page. And please do bookmark this page, because every month we will be adding in new attacks catering to not just Active Directory infrastructures, but other infrastructures as well, like Windows, Linux operating systems in general, your AWS environments, Azure environments. So any infrastructure that we think requires an update on an attack or a cybersecurity trend, it will be updated in this page. You can take a look at the technique, the live video demonstration, and also how you could detect the attack with Log 360. Okay, so day 1 was just Active Directory. I took you through various attacks, and I showed you the limitations when it comes to Active Directory auditing. More importantly, when it comes to the event viewer in Active Directory or the audit policies in Active Directory, where they fail, where they lack, and how AD Audit Plus can help. And today we'll be looking into the cloud aspect of Active Directory, right? The reason I chose to speak about the cloud is because the IT infrastructure of many organizations right now is not just Active Directory, but hybrid Active Directory, right? Many organizations, I'm pretty sure yours as well, have adopted cloud services like AWS, Azure Active Directory, or even Google Cloud alongside your traditional on-premises Active Directory infrastructures. And when such cloud services are adopted, it's important that we secure the cloud because our users have permissions in the cloud, our data is hosted in the cloud, and an attacker, if he or she is able to compromise the cloud infrastructure, he or she may even pivot and compromise your Active Directory infrastructure as well, because both Active Directory and the cloud infrastructure, they work as one single entity in a hybrid environment, right? So we will be talking about cloud security today, and not just cloud security, but also data security. Basically, security of our data stored across our Windows files and folders, Windows file clusters, NetApp, EMC, the list simply goes on. Any widely used popular file server in IT environments, we will be looking into how we could secure the data as well. So yes, let's jump in. Now, the whole reason I chose to speak about cloud today is because, like I said, this is how the infrastructure of many organizations look like. Right? It's not just Active Directory. Cloud services are deployed alongside Active Directory, and you can take a look at the diagram over here, and you can see that Azure AD is actually deployed alongside Active Directory, and Azure AD supports many other applications like Office 365 or other SaaS-based applications like Dropbox and Salesforce, and all of them are being actively used by this organization that already has an Active Directory infrastructure. Right? Now, why is this? Why is there a trend in the IT landscape? Why is there a shift to the cloud? The biggest reason for organizations to adopt the cloud would be the pandemic, or would be the drastic shift to the remote work lifestyle that made many enterprises, many small, medium businesses understand the benefits of adopting a cloud service, right? And more importantly, organizations are adopting Azure AD over any other cloud service because, well, Azure AD is by Microsoft, Active Directory is by Microsoft. Azure AD and Active Directory integrate well together. Most Office applications like Microsoft 365 or OneDrive or Microsoft Teams are all supported by Azure Active Directory. The backend of these applications is essentially Azure. And Azure supports a lot of other applications as well, like Salesforce, Dropbox, the list simply goes on, right? So if you take a look at the graph on your left, you will notice that AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud are the top 3 most adopted cloud services. This was a survey conducted by Flexera in 2021. This was a survey that was conducted worldwide. And yes, AWS is leading the pack, but it is predicted that over the days to come in 2021, Azure will be the most adopted cloud service, right? Now, the reason businesses adopt Azure AD is many, but the focus of today's webinar will be on Azure AD because most organizations like yours who have AD will choose to adopt Azure, and Azure is predicted to be the most adopted cloud service. So let's talk about Azure AD, and then we'll jump into data security, right? So this is the condition of today's IT landscape. AD alongside AD, there's Azure. More and more companies are willing to move their data to the cloud. So organizations are actually willing to move their company data, their financial information, their personally identifiable information or PII to the cloud service, and everything looks good, right? Cloud has its own benefits. You needn't pay for infrastructure costs anymore. The cloud provider will handle that for you. If your computational usage increases or decreases, your cloud provider will handle that for you. Cloud gives your users anywhere, anytime accessibility, which is again all wonderful. And you save a ton of money because you needn't purchase on-premise hardware or on-premise infrastructure anymore, right? So everything looks good. Businesses are adopting the cloud. Businesses are realizing the benefits of the cloud, and we can slowly see a future that is dependent on the cloud, right? But one thing to remember is increased cloud adoption does not mean all challenges are solved, right? So the same respondents to which the survey was conducted, also they were asked a question where they had to list out the challenges that they faced when it comes to adopting a public cloud service like Azure. And most of them said the first and the biggest challenge they faced was security. The second biggest challenge they faced was managing license costs or subscriptions in the cloud. And the third biggest challenge was ensuring that the right user has access to the right resource in the cloud, right? Basically, identity and access governance. And this was the result, the answers given by small, medium businesses and enterprises were actually pretty similar, right? So security, money, and IAM in the cloud were the biggest challenges that enterprises faced, right? So without further ado, let's take a look at Azure AD and let's understand how auditing works in Azure AD, right? Because like I said earlier, when I spoke about Active Directory, auditing or security auditing is the only way where you can detect anomalies in your infrastructure, be it Active Directory or be it Azure Active Directory, right? So to understand how Azure audits events, it's important to realize that Azure records events in two areas, right? One is a unified audit log, right? And over there, Azure-based events are recorded along with other Microsoft services. And apart from this, apart from the unified audit log, Azure also records events separately in a portal called the Azure AD Web Portal, right? So if I open up the Azure AD Web Portal right here, scroll down, do you see your audit logs here? So these are all security events in Azure, right? Any role granted to a user, group membership change, application that was modified or created, all details are right here, right? Jump into the sign-in logs and you'll find your users sign in, sign off, login, log off activities into the Azure portal and other applications that Azure supports as well, right? So these are the two main areas you need to look into to detect security changes in Azure. So the faster you look into these changes, the quicker you detect the changes, the better it is when it comes to monitoring or auditing security changes on an Azure infrastructure. And like I said, there's one more area called the Unified Audit Log. You can access the Unified Audit Log by typing in protection.office.com, right? Now, unfortunately, I do not have access to this page, but yeah, this is another area where you can access your Azure events, but the only difference is this area has other events as well, right? Other services that are supported by Microsoft, those events are also recorded in the Unified Audit Log, including Azure. But if you want to view Azure specific events, you can view them from the Azure AD Web Portal, like I showed you. And inside the web portal, you've got your sign-in logs and your audit logs, right? So this is the anatomy of auditing in Azure. This is how auditing works in Azure Active Directory. And let's take a look at how easy it is to actually break into Azure Active Directory, right? I wanted to start off with a simple example right here because I told you that many organizations, the connection is what is important, right? Active Directory, alongside Active Directory, Azure is deployed. And when you do that, you synchronize your users from Active Directory to Azure. And when you do that, you synchronize passwords from Active Directory to Azure. You synchronize user attributes from Active Directory to Azure. Everything happens, right? And when passwords are synchronized from AD to Azure AD, typically what happens is administrators or global administrators in Azure, they configure the pass the hash sync mechanism, right? It could be pass the hash sync. It could be other mechanisms as well, like federation services or pass-through authentication. But the most commonly used method can be this. As a matter of fact, when you do an Azure Express installation, this is the method that Azure prompts you to use. So we could safely assume that this method is chosen by many organizations. And what happens is your users' passwords from Active Directory, well, the hashes of those passwords, those password hashes, are synced to Azure Active Directory. And when they are synced, when your user attempts to log on to Azure or any application like Office 365 or any application that Azure supports, right, they can enter the same password, right? So when pass the hash sync is configured, your user can enter the same password in Azure AD as well. That's the whole idea, to make logging in easy for your users, to reduce the number of passwords in your environment. That's the whole idea of pass the hash sync, right? And when you configure pass the hash sync, what happens is there is an account that is created in Active Directory, right, called the MSOL account. Now, this account is created whenever you need to synchronize your users from on-premise AD to Azure AD. This is the account that you use, right? This account also synchronizes passwords from on-premise AD to Azure AD. You can find that account inside your domain controllers. If you open up your Active Directory users in computers tool, this is your domain node. If you right click on the domain node, click on properties, head into the security tab, and you can find the MSOL account right here. Okay, so that's the whole idea of this account: synchronize users, synchronize passwords. The account uses special privileges called replicating directory changes privileges to transfer password hashes or to share password hashes from AD to Azure, and attackers are targeting this account, right? If attackers are able to compromise the password of the MSOL account, as you can see here, of this particular account, the attacker can then leverage the privileges that the account has, in this case, replicating directory changes privileges, to get passwords of other AD users, right? If you recollect, I spoke about something called a password hash, a DC sync attack in my previous session, where I showed you that any account with replicating directory changes privileges can be used to simulate the behavior of a domain controller and get password hashes of users, right? So this is a similar technique where attackers try to compromise an account with replicating directory changes privileges and leverage those privileges to get password hashes of other AD users, including your privileged users and administrators, right? Now, the reason I showed you this attack is to just highlight on the importance of AD and Azure auditing, right? A user with access to AD can compromise Azure and can gain access to all on-premise Active Directory users' password hashes, right? And if you take a look at the Azure audit logs, these logs will not record any such attack attempts. The reason for that is because the attack happened on an on-premise account. So Azure technically has nothing to do with this on-premise account, right? So in order to monitor attacks on this account, you'll have to look in to your event viewer and you'll have to check for unauthorized modifications. Although the account is responsible for synchronizing users and their passwords and their properties to Azure, Azure does not record any activities because technically, according to Microsoft, the account is on on-premise Active Directory. So you'll have to look into these logs to detect any activities, right? So how can you stop this attack from happening? There are two simple steps you need to take, right? The first step is head into AD Audit Plus, click on Reports. And once you are inside the Reports tab, right, check on log on activity based on member servers, right? So you'll have a server in your network on which Azure AD Connect will be hosted, on which this account will be there. So attackers generally try and compromise the server on which Azure AD Connect is hosted. So do monitor that server, do monitor logons to that server to ensure no unauthorized user is logging on to the server where Azure AD Connect is hosted, thereby preventing this attack, right? And also, if you head into server audit, you've got another report here called Powershell Auditing that you can use to detect user accounts who are running scripts, suspicious scripts that can be used to do suspicious activities. For example, extracting the password of the MSOL account, right? If any user is executing that script on any server, especially the server on which the Azure AD Connect is hosted, then you can find that script right here. You can find the user who executed it. You can find the name of the server. You can read into the script details to understand what the script does. And of course, you can set up an alert where admins and security professionals in your environment will immediately be notified, right? Just a simple example as to how when a user from AD can compromise Azure AD and again, gain access to the password hashes of AD users, right? So let's take a look at the problems when it comes to auditing in Azure AD, right? Number one is there is no bird's eye view. Now, if you take a look at all these logs, it looks informative, but there is no bird's eye view. What do I mean by bird's eye view? We'll look into that via examples shortly. So that's my first point, right? Just like Active Directory events, everything is just dumped into one location. And I'm not going to lie, although these filtering features are a little better than Active Directory, it's not up to the mark, right? The second problem is Azure events do not record Active Directory events. Similarly, Active Directory events, they do not record Azure events. And there are some cases when you need to compare and contrast events to understand what's happening. If an attacker from AD is compromising Azure, or if an attacker from Azure is trying to compromise your on-premise environment, then you'll need to have a mechanism to correlate logs and understand what's happening, right? The third thing I wanted to say was these logs that you see, they're only stored for 30 days, right, with a premium license, and 7 days alone with a free license. So if I scroll down right here, and here you go. So audit logs just for 7 days with a free license, and premium logs for 30 days. But after 30 days, all these logs will be lost. So if you need to look back into them for threat hunting purposes or for compliance purposes, you will not be able to do so, right? So these are the 4 problems. No bird's eye view. The logs cannot be filtered well. Short retention period, only 30 days with a premium license. Azure does not support AD. AD does not support Azure. Without further ado, let's take a look at a few more critical events that must be audited in Azure AD. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was role changes in Azure AD, right? I spoke about how you could delegate users' roles in Active Directory, how you could make them password administrators, how you could give them the ability to reset passwords, to create other users, to modify user accounts. Similarly, in Azure AD, you can give your users certain admin roles as well. All you got to do is head into the Azure AD portal, and you can head into the roles and administrators and give your users certain privileges, right? In this case, I am a global admin in my Azure environment. So that's my role. I can, as a global admin, assign other roles to the other users or groups in my Azure environment, right? Now, what's the problem with this approach? Let me show you an example. If I scroll down, click on the audit logs right here, right? I'm going to select the last 7 days. I'm going to hit apply, right? Now, this is how the logs look like in Azure AD, right? Now, let me show you an example right here. So if you take a look at any log, for example, role management logs in Azure, right? You can filter that down. You can select core directory. You can select the category to be role management. You can say the last 30 days, yada, yada, yada. But you get to know that a user was added from a role. You get to know that the user was removed from the role, which is great, right? But one thing that's missing is you do not get to know what the name of the role is, right? Is the user a user administrator? Is the user a password administrator? Is the user an application administrator? Is the user a DevOps administrator, right? So that kind of information is actually absent in the Azure AD audit log. So what you need to do in that case is to click on a log, for example, head into modified properties. And once you head into modified properties over here, you can find the role name, right? Now, how is this a drawback? Because the information is still there, right? If I ask you a simple question like, hey, tell me who are the global administrators in Azure, right? You cannot search all these logs for a global administrator role. You have to click on each log. You'll have to click on modified properties, and you have to check if the global administrator role is present, and you have to rinse and repeat for all the other logs, right? How does AD Audit Plus make this simpler for you? Inside AD Audit Plus, jump into reports. Inside reports, Azure AD. Inside Azure AD, all you got to do is click on role management, recently added member to role. All right. And over here, you will get to know which user has been added to what role. Just give me a few seconds for this report to load, and I'm going to show you how exactly beneficial it is for you. So here you go, right? And the best part here is, do you see this? Called, where is it? The role name, right? Do you see this right here? You can simply hit search, click on role name. You can type the role that you want. Once you hit enter, you get to know all users with this particular role, right? This is just a simple example as to how AD Audit Plus makes things simpler for you. It helps you get a bird's eye view on the changes. It helps you search the reports in a way that the native logs cannot. And last but not the least, AD Audit Plus helps you to archive these events, and you can bring them back into AD Audit Plus whenever you want, right? So if your Azure events are, let's say, 6 months old, you can archive those events on a local server, bring them back into AD Audit Plus, and view them whenever you want. You can do that from the admin tab, and inside the admin tab, you've got archive events and restore archive events. And these two options will help you archive Azure events and bring them back into AD Audit Plus, right? Similarly, talking about groups in Azure Active Directory, this is another way where users can gain access to resources. Groups make or break your Active Directory or your Azure AD environment, and the problem repeats all over again. You get to know that it's a member added or removed from a group, which is awesome. You get to know which user added the target user to the group, which is again great, but no direct search. What's the name of the group? That information is missing. And then you'll have to click, 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 and check what's happening. And that's when AD Audit Plus simplifies things for you, because if I head into AD Audit Plus reports, group management, and recently added members to groups, over here, you can search based on a group name, and all that information is right in front of you, right? So how does AD Audit Plus excel comparing to Azure? You can search, you can archive events, you can bring them back whenever you want. So you can search, you can add or remove columns based on the result you like to see on the report, right? You can immediately export the report as a CSV file, a PDF file. If you have multiple Azure environments, you can monitor activities across your multiple Azure environments as well, multiple Azure tenants as well, right? And do not forget, all these reports are actionable. So you can head into the alerts tab, set up an alerts for these reports. For example, if a user is added to a group, you will immediately be alerted via email and via SMS, right? So let's take a look at a few more examples right here. This is an example of a hybrid Active Directory password attack, where a user from on-premise Active Directory launches a password spray attack on Azure users. And once the attacker is able to find a user with a similar password, it's game over, right? So let me show you a quick video simulation of the attack right here. I'm going to open up my PowerShell session, and I'm going to import a PowerShell script that I'm going to use for the attack. And within the next second, here you go. Here I have users and their plain text passwords right in front of me, right? So how did I do this? Just a simple PowerShell script. I have a list of email addresses on my desktop right here, which can be obtained in hundreds of ways. If you're an internal user, it's only a matter of seconds before you get the email addresses. If you're an external attacker, you can find these email addresses exposed on social media like LinkedIn or any other area. You can get email addresses for an Azure tenant. It's only a matter of time before a password attack is launched on your Azure environment. And the important thing for you to note here is this attack was launched from an Active Directory endpoint or a server to an Azure AD tenant, right? This is not a direct Azure AD attack. This attack started from an Active Directory connected server. And that's why I say monitoring activities across AD and Azure is important, right? This is where we help you. If I head into Google Chrome, open up my Azure AD, you see user logon reports. And do you see this called logon activity? Right? Over here, you get to know the user's on-premise details, like the on-premise SAM, on-premise SID, on-premise GUID. You get to know if the user is synced from AD to Azure. You get to know if the user is an only AD user or an only Azure user. You can also compare and contrast logon activities that are occurring in cloud and on-premises environments. And why is this important? Because when attacks happen from on-premise AD to Azure AD, right, especially password attacks like this, then logon activity reports will come in handy. Because this will tell you if a user in AD, it will give you the properties of that user in AD, and it will tell you if the user is trying to log on to an account in Azure, right? So logon activity, logon failures report will let you know Azure AD password compromises from Active Directory, right? That's why I say comparing activities between AD and Azure is important. Unfortunately, Azure events are not recorded in AD events are not recorded in Azure. That's why we've tried to bridge that gap here by giving you on-premise information right here. So you can compare and contrast, and you can find malicious activities, right? So there's a lot more when it comes to logons. For example, if you click on logon activity by applications, you can monitor logons not just into the Azure portal, but other applications as well, where you get to know what the successful logons are. You get to know how many logon failures have occurred. The list simply goes on, right? So apologies for this. I clicked on it by mistake. So let me head back to the slide deck and show you one more example here, and that's licenses, right? So we spoke about IAM in Azure, basically roles that are granted to users, groups that are granted to users, users that are added to groups, logons in Azure AD via AD. And I showed you that the logs do record these changes, but they're not up to the mark, and how AD Audit Plus can give you the bird's eye view, can archive events, can help you search through those events as well, right? The second problem after security was licenses, right? Many organizations are confused about the licenses. They are unable to maintain the judicial and the optimal usage of licenses in Azure AD. And when I tried to look for license-based logs in Azure, right, I didn't get any details about the license. I got to know that the user's license was changed. I got to know that this person changed the license on this user, but details on the license were missing. Now, I don't know if this is a software error, if this is an Azure error, or this is how licenses are, but this is what I got, right? No information about the type of license applied. And this is a problem, right? Because if I'm notified that a user's license is changed and I do not know what the license is, it's not very great, right? So that's where AD Audit Plus again bridges the gap. So AD Audit Plus, head into license management, and over here, you can find out users and their licenses that were changed, right? And if you click on show details, you get to know the details of the license as well, right? Here you go. This is the new value. This is the older value of the license. This is the newer value of the license. This kind of information is absent in Azure or didn't load in Azure, but AD Audit Plus can help, right? One more event in Azure AD, something called Illicit Application Consent Grant. Now, what is this? Why is this important? This is an attack trend that is catching up of late. And this is a way where end users are tricked into giving consent to applications in Azure. So the application can access the Azure data on behalf of the user, right? Now, the beauty in Azure AD, sorry, not beauty, but the problem with Azure AD is that users can actually grant access to applications, right? Any user can grant access to applications to access company data on their behalf or even on behalf of the entire organizations. And that's catching on. Users are eventually getting requests on their email to basically install an application, update a crucial application like Office 365. And when they do, they are asked to give consent to the application. And this is a classic example as to how attackers trick users into giving consent to an application that the attacker owns, right? So there's no password attack here. There's no user compromise here, just the user being tricked into giving consent to an application, and the application will access the data in Azure on behalf of that user or even the entire organization, right? So we can help you with this. So if I open up Azure AD, if I open up AD Audit Plus, Azure AD, you see this called application management. Whenever consent is granted to an application, you can set up an alert immediately in AD Audit Plus, and you get to know what the application name is. If there's any suspicious looking application like new app creation or any other application, and if your admin user or any other user has granted consent to that application, then it's something you need to look into, because now this application can access data on behalf of the administrator, right? Something important you need to look into, and AD Audit Plus can help with that. Of course, all the search features are available. You can even do an advanced search based on and or conditions. All you got to do is just click on plus, make a combination, make a condition, search for events based on an and or condition, and such granular filtering capabilities are absent in Azure AD. All right. So yes, that ends our time with Azure. Let's take a look at data storage in hybrid Active Directory environments. Now I showed you various use cases in Azure, how the event logs do record these changes, how the event logs are better than AD, but they're not up to the mark, and how AD Audit Plus can give you that insight you need, right? Speaking about data storage, this is also a crucial part of any environment, right? Because on-premise environments is an important part, cloud environments is also an important part, but equally, you need to look into your data as well, right? Your data is stored across file servers, your data is stored across NetApp, EMC servers, and many more, and you need to secure your data, right? How does data storage auditing work in Active Directory, especially across your Windows file servers? So what you got to do is you got to open up your domain controller, and you have to head into your group policies. Inside group policies, audit policies, object access policies. This is inside your default domain controllers policy. Just enable these three settings, right? Just enable audit file share, audit file system, and audit handle manipulation. And when you do that, auditing is enabled for all your files and folders, right? This is the step one that you need to do. The second step you need to do is to select a file or folder, right? For example, I have a file right here for which I'd like to enable auditing for. So I'm going to right click on that file. I'm going to click on properties. I'm going to click on security. And this is where you need to click on the advanced tab, auditing tab. And over here, you can give certain users access to view any change on this particular file. That's domain password spray file, right? You need to repeat that process for every file or folder, where you need to right click on that file or folder, click on the advanced tab, and give your users the required auditing privilege to simply view a security change, like a permission change, content change on that file or folder, right? Once you give your users the required privilege, the user can simply jump into the event viewer, select the security tab, and all those events will be right here. For example, do you see this? 4656. This is a file system event, right? So let's take a look at these numbers, at these events, and see where they lack. Let's take a look at what are the issues, right? So when it comes to file server auditing in Windows, there are three important events you need to look into: 4656, 4658, right? And 4660. These two events are basically to tell you how long the file was open for, meaning when the file opened, when it was closed. This will just give you that information, not very much useful. But the most important event here is event ID 4663, which will tell you the operation on that file or folder, right? So once you enable the audit policies, once you give your users the auditing privilege, they will be able to view the events on your files and folders, right? So let me quickly jump into the events, and let's talk more about how file or folder auditing works in Windows in specific, right? So in this case, this event ID 4663, like I said, 4663 is the most important event that you need to look into to record, to find out which operation had been done on a file or folder. And this is an example of a simple read operation, right? You get to know what the name of the user is or the process is and what file was read, right? Simply a read operation activity, right? If you have to find out if a file was modified or if a file was changed, you cannot do so. Why do I say that? Because all you get is that an attempt was made to access an object. You get to know which person tried to access the object, the file or folder. You get to know the location of the file or folder. But what you don't get to know is if the content in that file or folder has been changed or not, right? Similarly, if a file was deleted, you got to look into an event ID called 4660, and that will tell you that the file has been deleted. You get to know which user deleted the file, which is awesome. But what's the name of the file? You'll have to look back into event ID 4663 again to find a file that may have been deleted. So we need to compare time. This is at 6:53 p.m. If the event ID 4660 was also at 6:53 p.m., it could have been the file that was deleted, right? So that's something you need to do, right? Speaking more about file or folder auditing, in Windows. Windows, they do not tell you, Windows servers, they do not tell you if there is a failed attempt to access a file or folder. For example, let's say you have a file or folder with crucial data, with your trade secrets or your CEO's secrets in that file or folder, right? If a user is trying to access that file or folder and fails, your file or folder is safe, right? But it's important for you to find out and to know which users are attempting to access a file or folder that they really shouldn't be accessing. Failed access attempts is something you need to look into, right? There is no way you can determine if a file was created or modified in Windows, right? The only way you can determine if a file activity was creation or modification is to know the existence of that file, right? So for example, there's a file called ABC, and you know this file has been existing on your system for a long time. Then if an event is recorded, it could have been a modification event, right? But how is that possible? How can one person know the existence of all files and folders in their environment? So again, Windows doesn't give you the differentiation between create and modify, right? Similarly, when you rename a file or folder, Windows may record that event as a delete operation and a create operation. When you cut a file or folder, when you paste it in another location, Windows may record that operation as a delete operation and a create operation, right? So Windows, although lets you to cut, copy, move, or rename, it does not really understand what these operations are, right? It records the events inside your event viewer, and those events are not helpful for you to understand the activities on your files and folders, right? So let me give you one more such example here. This is an example of a Microsoft Word document, right? Now, what happens in a Microsoft Word document is, let's say there's a Word document. Let's say I'm working on a Microsoft Word document and it's been open on my system for an hour, right? So for 1 hour, I've been making changes to the document. I've been adding stuff. I've been deleting stuff. And each time the document will be auto-saved, right? Auto-save is a Microsoft feature, right? But your logs, they do not understand what auto-save is. So if you worked on a file or folder for, let's say, 20 minutes, after 20 minutes, if you take a look at the number of events, you'll probably find 200 plus events on that one file or folder, right? So this is because Microsoft, whenever it auto saves your file, it creates the file as a new file and then saves it again, right? Just one more example as to how file or folder auditing can get complex, right? Similarly, when a permission is changed on a file or folder, let's say I have a file or folder right here, right? And let's say I've right-clicked on it, I've clicked on properties, and I've changed the permissions on that file or folder, right? Permission changes are recorded. You get to know which user has performed a permission change on what object. You get to know that the permissions were changed. But then again, the data is an STDL syntax. In simpler words, this syntax is not really human readable. Looking at this syntax, you will not be able to immediately determine if the file or folder, what permission has actually been changed on that file or folder, right? Similarly, speaking about other files or folders like NetApp, there are a few difficulties as well where the logs are not up to the mark. This is where AD Audit Plus can help, because what AD Audit Plus can do is it can audit your Windows file servers, clusters, NetApp, EMC, Hitachi. The list simply goes on. We are actively trying to add support for more files and file servers as well. And the beauty of this is, once you click on Add Server, all you got to do is select the path, right? Once you select the path, hit Next, select the share, hit Next, and over here, you will be able to add the file or folder, right? So how is this beneficial to you? Number one is you needn't enable the group policies. These group policies that you see, we will enable that for your respective file or folder, right? And number two is you needn't set object level auditing on that file or folder. For example, you needn't right click a file or folder, and you needn't head into the security tab, you needn't click on auditing, and you needn't give a user permissions here. We will automate that process for you, right? So enabling group policies, enabling auditing permissions on a file or folder will be automated. All you're going to do is simply select the shares that you want, select the server that you want, and once you click next, once you click add, all your file and folders will be added for auditing. And this is what it looks like, right? Whenever there's a file or folder that's modified, renamed, deleted, created, moved, permission changed, any activity on your file or folder will be audited, right? So you get to know all of these events on your files and folders across your servers, across your users, across your network shares, right? And of course, all of these events are detailed and can be searched and can be alerted upon as well, right? You can do the search that you want. You can click on the file or folder name and you can read into the permissions of the file or folder. You can read into the properties. You can get every detail that you want. It's only a matter of clicking on the reports and checking out what the report is actually capable of, right? And these are the servers we currently support, right? So apart from file or folder auditing, we audit also your core system files and folders, like your your program files 86, your root system files and folders on your Linux systems, your C drive, your system 32 file or folder, basically the files and folders responsible for the security, the configuration of your OS, your database, your applications, all of those will be recorded as well. All those permission changes will be recorded as well with file integrity monitoring. You can enable file integrity monitoring for all your servers, like your member servers, workstations, workgroup servers, etc. Right? So what's the difference between file audit and file integrity monitoring? File audit will audit the data on your files and folders, like Windows file servers, NetApp, EMC. These are all data storage devices in your environment, right? File integrity monitoring, on the other hand, audits your system, your security, your configuration files and folders for permission changes, creations, deletions, etc. Right? So your program files 86, system root, your system 32 files and folders, your root files and folders on your Linux system, all of them fall here. All right. So that is about it for today. And just know that AD Audit Plus can help you audit AD, Azure, your data storage, and also your member servers as well. Not just your member servers, but your workstations, meaning your end user devices, your workgroup machines as well. All right. Now, AD Audit Plus is a module of the parent solution that's Log 360. Now, Log 360 has AD Audit Plus, but it has other solutions as well. If you take a look at it right here, my colleague Ram will be covering more about Event Log Analyzer in the upcoming session. So my point here is these are all sub-modules of the parent solution that's Log 360, right? If you want to purchase only AD Audit Plus, you can do so. You can access it from its individual URL, from its URL, as you can see here. On the other hand, if you purchase other solutions, right, like Event Log Analyzer or Office 365 Manager Plus or Exchange Reporter Plus, if you purchase other solutions, you can access these solutions from one parent console that's Manage Engine Log 360. Right? The only difference between Log 360 and AD Audit Plus is that AD Audit Plus is a sub-module of the parent solution Log 360 that supports many other modules. It's your choice. Right? If you choose multiple modules, access them from Log 360. If you have a single module, you can access it from its standalone URL, like you can see on the screen right now. Right? So that is about it for today. Guys, for those of you who've been requesting me for the recording, please do not worry. It will definitely be shared with you, the recording and the email ID. And before I wrap up, before I stop with the session, I do see 2 to 3 questions coming in. Just give me 2 minutes and I promise I will get back to your questions. I will answer your questions. But before I get to answering the questions, I'm quickly going to launch a poll, right? So now you're going to find a question flash across your screen. If you can help me out with the answers, that would be very, very helpful. This is just for our internal team. It's going to take 2 minutes max, and I promise I will be out of your hair. Thank you so much for your responses, guys. I'm going to end the poll. And now I would love to hear your feedback, guys, on today's session. If you think I've done well, if you think I need to cover something else, please do let me know. And I'd be more than happy to implement that in my upcoming sessions. Don't worry about your questions, guys. I'm going to get to them in just a minute from now. Thank you so much for your responses, guys. Thank you. Thank you so much for your feedback, guys. Thank you so much. So I hope you enjoyed today's session. I hope you found it informative. I do see your questions coming in, and I will be taking them right now. But until then, stay home, stay safe, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day and rest of your week. Right? So I'm going to mute myself right now, and I will be answering your questions. Please do stay tuned for the upcoming IT Security Masterclass series, which will happen very soon. There are still 2 days left, and my colleague Ram will be taking in those sessions for you. All right. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. I will be muting myself now, but I will be answering your questions. But until then, thank you. Take care. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.